missed the last bus and had to walk home. Everything my boss told me couldn't fit into my head in any way. I had to come up with some stupid story to somehow justify my nighttime presence at the security post. Like, I was visiting not far from work. And on the way home, I decided to go to the post and chat with the guard. Kind of believed it, although there was no certainty about it. Nevertheless, he didn't report me to the police. Shuffling my feet along the sandy path, I walked through the park. There was practically no lighting in it. All the lanterns, why did they burn out? One single lantern that somehow saved the situation stood about 15 meters away from me. Not far from it, in an unlit part of the park, there was a bench. On it, as it seemed to me, the outlines of a sitting person could be seen. I didn't attach much importance to this and went on. As soon as I caught up with the only burning lantern from the side of the bench, I heard something like a voice, only very quietly. I barely glanced sharply in the direction of that silhouette. At that moment, I heard the voice again. This time, it was more distinct.
Andrew, come here.
I was speechless. An ordinary person was sitting on the bench, but his face was not visible because of the darkness, and his eyes were illuminated with yellow light. I almost fainted. I pulled away from there with all my might, but at the same time, I continued to hear incomprehensible sounds behind my back that this creature was making. He kept calling me.
Andrew, come to me.
I ran non-stop for 15 minutes, and only when I saw familiar places did I stop. There was no one behind. What the hell was that shit? What is happening to me at all? I still haven't found an answer to how I ended up among the guard post. But this was already crossing all boundaries. My head ached again, and my body started buzzing. The night turned out to be terrible. I couldn't sleep properly. The boss gave me a week off to get myself cleaned up. I got up, went to the kitchen, poured in the rest of the morning tea, and stared out the window. Darkness, solid darkness. There's not a soul on the street. The lights were turned off everywhere in the neighboring houses, and I was the only one who didn't sleep. I only mentally reasoned about what was happening to me. After standing at the window for another 20 minutes, I went into the room. It's time to sleep. Passing by a large mirror in the hallway, I glanced at the reflection. I started violently. My throat was dry, and my limbs turned cold. In the reflection, for a split second, I saw a dead face. I'll swear to it. I saw my face in the reflection, but it was impossibly white as flour. There were blue circles around the eyes, glass eyes like a dead man's, and my reflection was smiling at me. My legs gave out. They became wadded up, and I almost fell. I barely made it to my bed. Jitters gripped my whole body. I couldn't get that mug out of my head. It was me. It was me. It just can't be. I fell asleep. I started dreaming again, just like in recent days. He looked very conscious. It was some kind of dirty and dark basement. In the middle of it, several chains with hooks hung around the perimeter. There were several people hanging on them. 2 men and 1 girl. The men were already dead. One of them was attached to the chain with his hands behind. His arms were twisted, and bones were sticking out of them. The second man was hung on a hook with a coccyx. He was bleeding profusely. And the girl seemed to still be alive, and her face seemed familiar to me, very much so. But still, I couldn't quite figure out who she was, and again, as if cut off. This time, I woke up on the street. It was night. The terrain was unfamiliar to me. My head was cracking so much that I thought it was about to explode. I was lying on some kind of bench, and I got up and started looking for at least some kind of transport to get home. An hour and a half later, I was home. I was sitting on the sofa staring blankly at the wall when suddenly I heard some scuffling in the kitchen, as if someone was there. Entering the kitchen, my heart almost stopped. My friend Ben was standing in front of the house, the one with whom we recently hung out at his house. The strange thing was not even how he got into my apartment, but that his face was unbearably pale, like a dead man's, and the same blue circles as I saw recently in the reflection of mirrors. And so we stood for 40 seconds in silence, looking into each other's eyes, and suddenly Ben uttered only 2 words.
"Why me?"
For which immediately at that moment I had a sharp pain in my head. The hellish pain took hold of me again, and my eyes went dark, and I lost consciousness, and I woke up lying in the kitchen. About 1 hour has passed. Of course, there was no one in the apartment. Immediately, I decided to dial Ben again, but his phone was still disconnected. I have not been particularly surprised by all the oddities that have been happening to me lately, but that vision never left my head. I remembered about my medications that I haven't taken for a very long time. Looking into the locker, I found an empty package of pills. I climbed into the pantry where I kept the main stocks of my drugs, but even there, absolutely everything was empty. The 30 packages were all empty. This is no longer normal. Then again, I had a sharp pain in my head, and I suddenly found myself on the street. What is happening to me in general? Damn. These are not even memory lapses. It's like someone is controlling me while I'm unconscious. Recently, this has been happening more and more often. Once again, when this happened, I was standing in the very basement in which I was in a dream, where men and a girl were hanging on chains. I was just standing in front of the table where my girlfriend was lying. I had a scalpel in my hands. I did her surgery. Side by side on the table was a cute little heart that I apparently had already cut out, and also a small liver. Now I've cut out her kidney. That's an infection. It didn't come to me right away. But after some 5 minutes, her little kidney was lying next to her heart and liver. Then I took a saw that was also lying nearby and just sawed off her head. I told you her face was familiar to me. Oh, by the way, those 2 men who were suspended by the screams, it was Ben and my boss. Now, he definitely won't say anything to the cops. It's so funny, I started remembering everything. That very night when we fell asleep with my chick, I really went to my work. I remember how I flattened that fool Nick in the press and how Davey was soured. It was also a class. The whole workshop was covered in blood. Yes, and I dragged my chick to this basement in a couple of days. By the way, I completely forgot. My psychiatrist, I'll have to visit him.